The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Hi, good morning, everyone, or good evening. My name's Ray Arrell. This is episode 23. We've had some great deal of success with this podcast as well as this live event over the last year. I want to thank everyone for participating through it. We actually just passed the 10,000 mark of replays. Thank you all for letting everyone know that the podcast exists. We really appreciate it. If you guys don't know who the Agile Alliance is, the Agile Alliance is a nonprofit organization that is the founders of the Agile movement way back in the dawn of time, back in 2010. That doesn't exactly sound like the dawn of time, but it's, it does date back a little bit. And through that, they've been running conferences and events and have a really great online presence. If you go to agilealliance.org, you can find a whole bunch of different ways of helping to go improve your Agile adoption. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And this comes from the Agile Narrative Project. This is something that we've been collecting stories from the Agile community for about a year and a half now. And we saw some different signatures that have come up in the data itself. If you guys are not familiar with sense making, you can go look up the methodology. But in a nutshell, what we do is we collect micro narratives and stories. Those stories, then the person who puts it in actually self-signifies the story, meaning that they say that this is how I feel about it, rather than an ethnographer or somebody else saying, I think that this is what this person meant. And then we go through the data and look for large patterns and find exemplar stories that kind of represent a pool of stories that might be in the mix. And a recent story that just got put in is this one called Yes Master. And you can read through it here if you guys are online. I'll go ahead and read it for you if you're not. It reads, this person read a tweet today. And it says, apparently this Scrum thing is so great that you need a person on every team dedicated to forcing others what to do. This is exactly how Scrum feels on our team. Our Scrum master, the person put in quotes, is worse than our manager or old program managers of being a taskmaster. I don't feel like I own anything on this product, and I feel that we have zero self-organization. We've just been told what to do and what to think. I hate Agile. Well, that's pretty harsh. And this person put it as being combination of being ignored and burned out, lack of autonomy, bad work environment, and that their whole Agile experience is about obligation. So want to go off and talk about how we can make stories less like this. Anyone want to jump in on this particular question? How about Jorg? Do you have an opinion on how we can make less stories like this?
Yes, definitely. And the first thing is, talking about expectations. And yeah, I'm meaning talking to people who facilitate teams in whatever way in expectations. If this Scrum Master has been incentivized to make the team work, and I've seen managers ask exactly this: you are responsible for the output of the team, you're the master. So then at least identifying this chain of targets, directions makes a lot of difference. Because if it's like this, it doesn't really help to talk to this guy, immediately try to go up the hierarchy to find the misinterpretation of Agile, make it clear that this is not what is working. The other thing is show examples of where making the team independent generates better results, to just give an impression that, yes, actually this is going to work. I once came across a very nice TED Talk just explaining that you don't need to organize everything, because already starting with childhood, kids in playgrounds can do self-organization surprisingly well, having never been taught. Sharing these expectations, telling stories of things that go differently, and especially opening up opportunities about appreciating the team. They might not be aware, so feedback is probably a good one. Talk about it. That's the very first thing, and highlight the right behavior again and again, because very often people just don't even notice that they do something independently if they're used to not working independently.
Beverly, do you have something to add?
Yes, I was just going to add that perhaps this Scrum Master or even the whole team has not been trained properly in how Scrum really is supposed to work, so that they don't understand that the role of Scrum Master is really more of a servant leader type of role and what that entails. I also thought that perhaps they should address this in a sprint retrospective, that they are, they could put it somehow in a gentle way to let the Scrum Master know that they don't feel engaged in the work because they're not feeling like they're being respected and trusted to be a self-organizing team.
Right. So from a training perspective, have you found that there's any particular good way that this can be introduced where because the term Scrum Master sometimes gets, I think, a little bit misunderstood, even by people who take the training. How could you reinforce that a little bit better?
Well, I think, too, that at least in my company, a lot of the Scrum Masters come from a project management background where you are more of a command and control type of role. So I think that, training and, I read a lot of books and things as well, but, I think like Mike Cohn has some very good blogs and books. He has that Mountain Goat software, which is a good resource and for tips and how to deal with certain problems. So that there are resources out there online or in books or in training. But I think particularly it sounds like in this case, especially the Scrum Master needs the training to kind of understand their role and how they're supposed to be supporting the team rather than kind of managing the team.
Sure. I fully agree with that. Judy, what do you have to add?
I was going to say also, I agree with the training part, but I also say if you see the folks that come out of traditional waterfall project management, they're so used to running everything. It's hard for them to sit back and listen in a meeting. And if they hear silence for more than 5 or 10 seconds, they feel like they have to interject. And I think that's a big part of the education is you've got to sit back, you have to listen, the teams will start talking. But if you continually interject and put in your feedback, nobody's ever going to speak up.
I agree. One of the patterns that I see quite often is that when we're in a group setting where the Scrum Master finds themselves always as the person that people are talking to, meaning that they don't know how to step out of the circle, they don't let the self-organization occur. And once there's something quiet, yeah, you're right. They end up, kind of awkwardly taking over the meeting. And I can tell you as a coach, I've stared probably 5 to 10 minutes at a pen because I know that I'm not going to go pick it up. It's not my meeting, it's their meeting. So we'll just stare at the pen for a little bit. And then eventually somebody will grab the pen and they'll go do something, which is good. Marina, do you have something as well?
I love this discussion, and one element I wanted to add is the importance of not only training, but actually coaching new Scrum Masters on leadership style. Very often, a person is grabbed and told, hey, you have a new title and a new function to fulfill. You're a Scrum Master now. And it really takes one-on-one coaching to instill the new mindset and this new idea that you are there to empower the team and enable them rather than dictate, right? And this is where servant leadership that was already mentioned becomes so important.
And do you feel that maybe that as a coach, you should spend time collecting more feedback about the way that you enable servant leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. In my experience, what works really well is a combination of training, team coaching and individual coaching in this area. And oftentimes, the Scrum Masters are looking at the leadership and seeing a very non-servant leadership behavior upstairs. They emulate that on the team level. And this is where executive coaching becomes invaluable.
And one interesting note about this particular story, if you notice that the manager would be, if the manager had read this story, they would 100% disagree with this person. Mid-management would be 80% in disagreement, and executive management 90% disagreement. So the trust of this person being able to go and talk to their manager about this seems relatively low, which is an unfortunate place for this person to be in. Raven, did you have something to add?
Yes, I did. And I agree with all the comments that was just stated, but I want us to take this up a notch as far as leadership is concerned. A lot of times, contractors, us as Scrum Masters, can come on as contractors, and we have this multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar project. And leadership is saying, well, we have 4 months, and I understand that you're a Scrum Master, but I really need you to manage this team. I really need to know the ins and outs of every user story. I need you to press on them for this. I need you to press on them for that. And so, yes, we as Scrum Masters can have all the training and know what to do. But if you have pressures and you don't know how to handle or manage those pressures from the leadership above, you can be tricked into being a really bad, what I say, project manager, and pressing and micromanaging that team and having these negative effects. Because if the stress is trickled above, it definitely trickles down, it trickles down.
Right. Agreed. And Ben, are you there? Oh, wait a minute. Let's try this button here. Ben, do you have something to add as well? It looks like Ben doesn't have a microphone, but what he put on here was that he believes that the team, both the dev, the PO, the QA, they should feel that they should trust the strengths among themselves to call out the bad behaviors in the retrospective. Sometimes, though, what I've seen is, especially in areas of low trust, you need to come up with a mechanism or a way to be able to collect that where it does not, so it can be heard. And sometimes for teams, that becomes a real huge challenge for them to be able to bring that up, even in a retrospective process itself. And that could also be a sign that the retrospective isn't working quite well. Brian, do you have something to add, Brian?
Yeah, hi, Ray. I was just curious. I might have missed this part in the initial part of the conversation, but what was the nature of the team? Was this like an early adoption team, or were they more a mature team?
This particular team, the story as you read it up on the screen is this is how it came in as a common pattern across multiple stories, and this one tended to bubble up as the role of the Scrum Master tended to be something more of a project owner type. And if you read through a number of other stories that we collected, it's the similar story, which is the Scrum Master is basically a control freak.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I see it now. Thanks.
No problem. So with that, if there's no more conversations on this one, any ways of also being able to just dampen this to see less of these stories, we can move on to the Slido.
Ray, let me share an experience I had for a situation that wasn't that extreme, but where managers found a real smart way to improve the working of their Scrum Masters. And they just assembled them into a team tasked with measurably improving the organization. And suddenly they were no longer Scrum Masters, but team members charged with something. Obviously, they found a experienced coach to Scrum Master that team, and suddenly they could take a new perspective. That yielded quite some astonishing results in always some improvements that probably would have taken a longer time to find otherwise, and a lot of learning for the Scrum Master team.
Interesting. Artie, do you have something to add?
Yes. I was thinking about, all the others, what they had to say. And I believe there is something that can be done to never have this kind of a situation emerge. And that would be through the Scrum planning. Now, I understand that Scrum planning is basically to talk about the user stories and see how it is managed. But at the same time, it can also determine what would be the roles and responsibilities of the team members. They understand the dependencies. They understand what is expected out of them. And the Scrum Master also understands that how these little user stories will be coordinated over a period of time, so that he knows his role and the team members know their role. So the Scrum Master doesn't have to direct them that what needs to be completed when and why it is not done. All the other members are kind of responsible for their own roles. So the expectation is set at the very beginning of the Scrum.
Sure, the expectation of what my role is the Scrum Master versus my role as any other role on the team itself. Yeah, that's very good advice. One of the things I see with teams a lot is that they don't spend enough time to say that isn't my role to play on the team. Or if there's someone who thinks that that's their role as well, there's that role conflict of, okay, well, I thought that was what my part was as well. So team chartering and other things and team working agreements are all good things.
Yeah, if everybody becomes accountable for their own roles, nobody has to actually manage them or direct them what to do and when to do. They'll be responsible.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and that's, I think, probably one of the boundaries of getting self-organization. Now, on the other aspect of lack of trust, where the manager above doesn't agree and others, this person could be in a situation very similar that I was in the beginning of our Agile transformation a long time ago, which is it was expected that there was, sort of the wringable neck, the chokeable person, the person in charge, that whole kind of role where, who do I go after if the team isn't delivering correctly? And that's the team. You can't go after one person if that doesn't work out. It's a group that needs to have a conversation with.
Correct.
So,
Yeah,
Ray, I do think there is I guess a play for those of us who are Agile coaches and those of us who understand that when we read this, I mean, that the person that they're describing, unfortunately, is not a Scrum Master. I mean, they may have a title of a Scrum Master, but I don't think we need to be so subjective in how we treat it. I think that for those of us who understand what Scrum Masters are and who have applied for roles as Scrum Masters, if you see, even from the interview process, even when you first look at your first 20-minute screener from an interview person, if the organization isn't at a point where we're not, where they don't understand what a Scrum Master is, the second question is, okay, well, what Agile coaching do you have? What transformation leadership do you have in place? Is that plan there? Because otherwise, nobody's set up for success. And it may not be this person. This person may have been trained to be a Scrum Master in that way. It's just not doing justice. I think we can take a more objective approach to when we see anti-patterns with Scrum Masters.
Yeah, I found this interesting because I saw the tweet, originally that somebody had posted, and then it ended up being in the story data within a couple hours, and it must have resonated with this person after they read it. And if you read the tweet storm that was around this particular individual after they posted it, I still, we're how many years into Scrum and we're still having problem with this role and its role name and, just how people perceive it. That's worrisome to me. So with that, if there is no other comment, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Slido. It looks like the top question up here is, what coaching techniques do people use to gain leverage and traction when undertaking Agile transformations in a more traditional environment? Do anyone want to start off on that? It's a good question. It's kind of a common question. Now, traditional environments. That's kind of a kind of picking up on this keyword. I assume traditional environment potentially can be a waterfall organization. And the undertaking of this, I think for me, what always got pushed up against looking at kind of an assessment of where we're at here's our current state and what is our future state going to be, what we can all agree upon as being a future that we're going to go moving towards. So one of the techniques I've used to just, I guess gain leverage and traction has been, let's all get acknowledgement of where we want to go as a team.
Yeah, I think one way to do it is as well to stake out short-term, or let's say first step experiments and results, so that you show that, you are changing something and you can make a statement of what the impact is, even if the impact is not immediately positive, because learning sometimes is negative. And this openness of showing that, I aim for this, I measure it that way, and actually you're going to get something reliable, can give you a lot of leverage, because it just convinces managers that, you're really serious about the method.
Sure. I agree with that. Judy, you have your hand up. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to say in the IT world and in medicine, I've taken a couple teams, and even though the whole organization isn't agile, I've taken smaller teams and just used a lot of the methodologies. Just started out just maybe really slow, just introduced a couple new concepts to them. I didn't try to cram everything down their throat and say it's everything agile, but just use little techniques. Like I said, just introduce them to some of the terms and try to get them excited about it. That seems to have worked very well.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of build up on the individual successes of introducing a little bit of change at a time.
Right, and then every sprint you can introduce something new, another technique, or they start to get curious about it, and a lot of times they kind of can drive where you go next. But I think it's where sometimes people can fail is if they try to do everything by the book rather than kind of feeling out how your team is and how they react, and to work with those different teams. I feel like sometimes I have to change things up depending on the audience and the teams.
I fully agree with that, and I think that the whole notion of you can open up too many cans of soup, and if you can't eat it, it's just going to spoil. Brian, did you have something to add?
So one of the techniques that I like to use is I actually like to start with kind of discussing the different types of work. Work that especially at the team level, that's maybe more needing of a longer term product level development work where you need the innovation and the test and learn and the validated outcomes, as opposed to maybe like one-off or just work that efficiency is needed the most. And I think when a team kind of gets the idea that if you're working from a place where there's a lot of knowns versus working from a place where there's not a lot of knowns, then Agile fits very well into those different spaces, or even traditional fits well. Maybe might even fit better in some circumstances into the different spaces. That's been one of the approaches that I've had the best success with.
So just don't try to paint the world with one methodology. Pick the right methodology is the lesson there.
Absolutely, especially if you're in an organization where you may be encountering traditional project managers and developers who have been doing traditional development and processes well for 20 years. Trying to come in and say, I've got a newfangled agile that can solve all your problems, it just increases the anxiety. But if you show them that those places where they're having trouble with, usually around transparency, prioritization, how do I actually make sure I'm building the right thing, you can usually get better buy-in and actually resonate with the problems that they know they're having already.
Sure. Raven, you have your hand up.
I keep it very simple. I've done many transformations, and one, I like to less agile terminology in the beginning, the better. I'm going to say that because words do matter as you're trying to help the organization make changes. And so what I tend to do is use everyday terminology. For example, when I wanted to try to implement the daily stand-up, I didn't call it a daily stand-up initially. I just said, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Let's make sure we connect every day. And then after we got the groove of having this this 15-minute time box or less, then I would say, okay, team, congratulations, you just completed what in the Scrum framework is a daily Scrum. Okay, and so, and then, evaluating that, and reviewing that, from our retro, say, a small retro standing there. Well, let's talk about this process. How did that process go for you when we met for 15 minutes? Was it helpful? Everyone felt good about it. And I said, okay, do you trust me to help facilitate another event? And let's evaluate that. And so with that daily Scrum, I gained trust from the team as their facilitator to try different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so building trust over time, I like that. I think that as a theme, I think that one of the things we do as Agile coaches sometimes, especially in large transformations, is we tend to try to roll out again too much change too fast. Doug, what do you have to add?
It's interesting. I take a little different approach than Raven does, in that I do believe language matters. I do believe calling things what they are matters, and took the approach of, I'd like the approach of, how do we start doing Scrum on a team? We start doing Scrum. We jump in with both feet, and we don't give the folks, we do it as a one-way street. We're not going backwards. We're going forward, and come on, jump on the train with us and try to build that excitement. I find retrospectives are probably one of the best things we have. One of the greatest tools we have is that ability to talk about it. That after that first iteration, a couple weeks down the line, and just to sit down with everyone and say, what did we like? What didn't we like? What'd you hate? And we even see in the first story there, oh, I hate Agile. Let's talk about that. Let's explore that. Let's get into this a little more. And really, taking advantage of the tools we have in our toolbox as coaches and, as Scrum, training Scrum Masters as well. The other big one is, go ahead.
No, I was going to interject and say, what do you do about the fact and I've had teams actually tell me that they've been scrummed before. What do you do in that situation where if you introduce these same things that they had a big reaction to before, and they're just sitting there not listening? How do you deal with that?
We always have those who are not going to get on board. We have our early adopters, we have our laggards, and I find one-on-one time is best. I do a lot of one-on-one interviews whenever I join a team. Set the time, take the time and make the time to sit down with the individuals on the team and find out who they are. What works for them? What doesn't work for them? What do they like? What do they not like? And really treating people as individuals, and remembering that, hey, we're dealing with our coworkers here and our peers, or those that we're going to work with, and sitting down and hearing what they have to say goes a long way.
This is Maria. I have a couple of points that I wanted to bring up. First, starting with a really good discussion about the why we're doing this, discussing the value, because very often, especially in large transformation efforts, I see that people perceive that we're doing Agile for the sake of Agile. So nobody took the time in the beginning to explain the vision of, well, how are we going to be more productive, more engaged? How are the teams going to be happier? It's not going to be great when we're empowered to focus on the how we are doing our work, when leadership just shows us the why and the what, right? So not skipping that step, tremendously important. And then another thing, also in conjunction with that first step, empowering the people to bring up the concerns, right? We're talking about very traditional organizations here. They've been trained that bringing up concerns is bad. Communication is shut down, is disempowered. So oftentimes, I actually start from a quick communications workshop. Hey, this is okay. You're asked to talk, and this is a safe space. This is you helping us rather than you rocking the boat. And that's very powerful. And usually it takes people some time to trust the process, and that's okay, right? And if they had negative experiences with Agile transformation in the past, and often they did, you have to acknowledge it. You don't go in with rah, 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 this is going to be amazing. You say, hey, I know that this didn't work out in the past, and I am asking you to trust us and to give us another chance. Can we do this right? What didn't work before? What can we do differently now? And then they start feeling like stakeholders rather than pieces on the chessboard.
I agree with that. I mean, one of the things that we changed from our adoption model, we used to have we establish a goal, and then we go implement a goal. And that was sort of the type A personality that we had of things. And what we learned is that we needed to set a goal. We need to then, of course, communicate that goal and then enlist help. Who would like to join in and help us with this goal that we're trying to go do? And what we discovered is that stakeholder would step forward and say, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of this journey. Joseph, you've had your hand up. Did you want to add something to this?
I think Maria and the person before her kind of covered most of it. But it's making the conversation a two-way street. Yeah, I had experience with a coworker who, in one transition at one of my groups was going through, conversation after conversation did not, she hated the ambiguity, called everything ambiguous, and just would not let go of it. And basically sitting down, having the conversation. Well, what are you meaning by ambiguity? And then, then talking out the problem. And then going, and maybe just one other comment to one of the earlier questions where somebody who, the question was, I hate, somebody came back and said, I hate Scrum. Well, or I hate Agile, pointing out, well, you weren't doing it. You hated the process that you were in, but it wasn't Agile or Scrum.
Yeah, what you were doing felt bad, and it felt bad because you weren't actually doing it. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's one of the articles I wrote on the Agile Alliance site was about that exactly, which is if your transformation's hurting, maybe you weren't transforming in the first place.
Exactly.
And that's always an issue. Shall we pivot to a new question? The next question that's up here is it possible to release plan without planning out a sprint in advance when you're working on three projects at a time?
I would say, it's pretty simple. You just do time boxed releases. So you get every week you get something from me, every 2 weeks, whatever you do. But actually, I can't exactly promise what's inside. It's just going to be working software. So.
So you're taking the game development model where it's done when it's done, and it might come out next week or it might come out a year from now?
Yeah, if you don't give me priorities for these 3 projects, then there obviously is very little I can do in terms of real prediction. So that's definitely something I would do to make that uncertainty very, very visible. And contrasted by the fact that actually, yes, there is something going on, and I would really, really make sure that I have at least one measurable delivery every iteration, and this one tested and really working, because otherwise people will just feel that I'm doing nothing. In the end, it will be extremely frustrating. And I know that this plan will not satisfy the managers, but at least it will force them into a discussion of what's happening.
I'm struggling with this one. There's a lot of people who voted this one up higher. Planning, in my book, is something that is required. It's my thing to have the requirement done to do this so that I know that I can balance my own time. It isn't. The act of planning is just about discovering unknowns. I can keep going down this list of reasons why I would do it, but to then suddenly not do it, I think you end up with you're going to get what you get from it.
Yeah, if I was planning, I would try to do those 3 projects in succession, not in parallel. That assumes that I don't have the control.
I love that as we were talking about this, somebody voted the next question up higher.
One of the things that I have seen when teams are being asked to do the multiple projects and plan and around that nature is, I think sometimes we forget that Agile works best when the stakeholders and the teams are operating in Agile fashions. And this can usually be a symptom of the stakeholders, users, customers being too far away from the team. Mm-hmm. So because they're waiting for that end release. In that case, if you're being asked to plan like that, I usually try to add this is the feedback that we're going to need from the different stakeholders at different times, and try to bring them closer to the project product, so that they're more involved. And then that will usually lead to a better understanding of what it actually takes to get good results.
Sure. And I agree with that. I think just to kind of round out this question, and we can pivot to the next one, planning itself, if it doesn't feel like it's benefiting you in some regards, I think you need to really understand why you're planning in the first place. A couple things, at least as anti-patterns that I see in this question, is that when you're working on 3 projects at a time, I bet you the planning sessions are doing a lot of planning. It feels like that's all you're doing. One thing that you might want to recommend is maybe go down and work on 1 project rather than working on 3 at a time. The actual planning out each of your sprints, it's really about you keeping control of your day. It isn't about project management as much as it is about trying to keep control and not overload yourself and burn yourself out. At least that's my impressions of all of that. Let's go ahead and pivot. If we have no other hands that go up for this one, people are still voting back and forth. Hopefully when I hit the archive button, I don't archive the wrong one here. Dang it, I did. I guess I'm going to pick the one right underneath of this. Hold on. Let me go to the archive real quick. Don't you hate when things fidget up like that? Does anyone remember what the other question was there? Dang it. Okay. That's when everything goes out of control. We've only done this, for 23 episodes. And then suddenly there's a question that went into ether land. And I apologize to the person who I might have just put in there. We'll resurrect it on the next one. Anyway, the next question is, how do you convince leaders to give product owners the authority that they need?
I find the term leaders interesting here, because it somehow suggests the difference between a leading role and a product owner role. To me, product owners are always in part leaders for the product they want to get done. They are passionate about. So resolving at least this contradiction that at least I somehow read there would be one of the very first things I would try to do, and understand why there seems to be a contradiction. Because that already might do some convincing.
Right. To convince the leaders to give a product owner the job that they've already assigned to them is kind of a little bit disheartening.
So I wanted to add something about that. So there are companies that they have like executive members, some of the smaller ones that have like CEOs, like, people who are senior. They have product owners, but at the same time, those people are empowered to come and say, okay, now this is the highest priority, you need to do it, no matter what product owner thinks. So maybe this question is mostly related to those type of companies and culture.
Mm-hmm. Well, just to add on to the comment of, different roles with different degrees of who's responsible for what I find is that product owner, when they say, that person is the one responsible for the backlog and making sure that the backlog is sorted correctly, the expectations of that individual, sometimes management doesn't kind of unravel the rest of the relationships with other different people who thought that they still had that power. And I think that gets back into that collaborative chartering thing again, which is, what's my role and how does that role interface with others?
Yeah, maybe to adding into the comment that, these are maybe organizations where CEOs interfere with the work of the product owner. There again, it's about finding the people to take the product owner role that are passionate about the result, because actually they will hopefully make clear that actually they are convinced that they are producing something good for the company and that this is disrupted. And if you get it, at least you have the openness to discuss this. That might be an eye opener for that CEO who still cares for his company's success, and seeing that he has passionate people that he's just frustrating, maybe even without a good reason.
Agreed. If there's no more comments on this one, I can go ahead and actually hit the archive button and actually not, hopefully not destroy the other ones in doing so. Going once, going twice, and let's go on to the next question. Ways to persuade. It's easy for me to speak. Let me try that one more time. Ways to persuade the team of the value of breaking their work down into small chunks. Who would like to start that one off?
One thing I like to do very much is celebrating finishing. The first thing that's finished, and if nobody breaks down his task, I'm normally going to do this for my own. Gets a very clear statement, that's done. And suddenly people see that, things get done. And actually this gets acknowledged. And so suddenly they want to finish something as well. That is very often a very strong tendency. And sometimes it even helps to do the breakdown. For example, during a daily, if somebody reports, I've done this, they're actually saying, that's such a breakthrough. Let's separate this from the story we have on the board and let's split it. I know it's not perfectly in line with the rules, but let's make sure, we really capture that we finish this.
Mm-hmm. Raven, what did you have?
Yeah, I go to the notion of visual radiators. The more our work is visual and transparent, the less questions we will have. So if leadership is wondering, if your functional manager is wondering what's going on and what is getting done, what better way is it to really see line by line, seeing these small pieces of functionality instead of, the bigger, large stories, right? So the more large and ambiguous things are, the more questions you'll get, right? The more detail it is, and when I say detail, meaning the breakdown of the structure, the less questions you'll get, and you might have more congratulations, as the previous gentleman mentioned.
Right. So by having that smaller chunks of work, it's easier to, from a persuading of the team, you're just going to get less questions. You'll be able to do more work. Is that what you're kind of saying the persuasion method is for them?
Indeed.
Okay. Joseph, what do you have?
Yeah. Also, it's a gateway to TDD. If they break their story, a complex story is going to have a complex testing structure. If you break the story down into smaller chunks, you get better unit tests. And since this sounds like it's a question from a new team, it's a great way for it would be a segue to taking a team down the TDD path.
Mm-hmm. And what if they, from going towards TDD, now that's two persuasions. One, you got to break down your work into smaller chunk, and now I'm going to persuade you to TDD?
Well, then I'd say so. Because then you start pitching the benefits of TDD. You've got test coverage, and which leads to automated builds, and everything else that's going to come with it. But by bringing it down, like let's just turn one corner, and then you could see, and then start to see the benefits by going that way. And then again, I'm going to second and third everything that's been said is you're marking those accomplishments. You're seeing your burn down progress because you've finished stories throughout the sprint.
Mm-hmm. Ariza, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
That was right. Yeah. So there are several things I use when I want to persuade the team. The first thing is how many times at the end of, if you're using a Scrum, how many times at the end of the sprint you have a lot of work for QA, not a lot of work for dev, and you might need to carry it over. The reason behind that is you didn't split it into smaller chunks so you can finish. The other thing is several things in retrospective. The team comes back and says, okay, product owner last day gave us this feedback that took us for over to finish. I would say, okay, that's the reason behind that is you didn't have a smaller user story, so you couldn't get the feedback earlier. So having the smaller ones, you can go to the product owner at the end of 2-3 days and get the feedback. And you still have time to fix if anything needs to change. Of course, every day you need to talk with them, but at the end of the day, the demo is the most important thing. You have a working software, you can get feedback. About TDD, I usually seen that the team that doesn't know the concept of dividing in smaller chunks, it's too early for them to talk to about TDD. I think usually like TDD comes into play and you need to coach the team after you pass these phases and like cutting it smaller and split the stories, finish up the stories really fast in the sprint, during the sprint, not end of the sprint. So that's my idea about the TDD and this.
And so it's sort of the gateway drug to TDD. Small work chunks, then off to TDD afterwards. Does anyone else have anything else to add for this? If not, we'll go to the last question for today. It looks like you guys are really getting good about getting votes up higher while we're doing the meeting, I've noticed. I'm going to probably have to freeze the list. The next one is from Emily Hall, and it's the organizational leadership doesn't get how permanent teams are superior to deploying resources to a project. Sources to explain the behavioral science behind teams. So this is, I believe, and Emily, are you on here? Let me just look on the list. You're not. Long-lasting teams, if you look at the Tuckman model and other science that's been done that says that long-lasting teams or permanent teams tend to be more superior as far as performing to their ability to know what each other, the team dynamics, they've kind of worked all that out a bit. They've went through the storming phase and they know how work can be done effectively together. The only disadvantage that I see with long-lasting teams, and this has been with the DARPA model that they've showed, is that once teams have lasted for a long time, sort of a bureaucracy forms around them or within them, and that tends to sometimes cause the behavior of the organization itself. They tend to not be as dynamic any longer. Does anyone else have anything to add to this?
So I had something to add. So teams that are together for a long while, they're really good. They're working really good together. But one other thing is like mix and match teams after like a quarter or something. That would be sometimes helpful to like make the like skills contagious, make agility contagious. Usually when I build a team that is really mature in Agile, after a while I start decimating people like in separate teams. So they will be Agile evangelists in teams that are not that mature, especially on the cultural side. So that's something I usually use to like make agility and all the other things spread throughout the organization.
I think, I'm reading this, I think, a little differently. I'm seeing this question, and this is what I experience, is we have several, they don't assign teams everything. Teams aren't, true teams in the Agile world. I sit at my own desk. The person over there sits at his own desk, another half mile away. And I think what she's saying is, how do you convince them not to just, in a resource meeting, assign 6 resources and everybody still stays in their own places? That's kind of the way I'm reading this. And I struggle here. I've tried my best to convince leadership to say, coexist these teams, get everybody together. I've been most successful when I have convinced them on one project that they're really struggling with to say, I need all these guys co-located. I need them in an area if you want this done in 2 months.
Should we make Agile Coaching Network shirts that says, I'm not a resource, I'm a human being?
That'd be great.
Yes, please.
Absolutely. No, I said even like, I don't even, to have a long-term team would be amazing but just to have a team that was co-located would be amazing.
I have had in my career, and I've worked in the industry in a big Fortune 100 company for 30 so years. I only had it once, and it was the most beautiful thing in the world. And we all sat in a team room, and it was like, milk and honey. It was just beautiful. Maria, what did you have?
Yeah, I really loved all the responses to this question thus far. And I just wanted to add, I don't know about using the permanent language, but long-term teams, definitely. because this is where the beauty of team dynamics comes into fruition. This is where milk and honey and joy show up. One model that I used with great success and joy, I must add, is having a variant of a dojo model where you have a very mature team, either agile maturity or agile maturity and DevOps maturity, and then you would onboard a new team member for 2 months. And so the new team member fully participates, learns everything, and then goes back to their original team and trains everybody there. And that's a really exciting model because the original team is never stale. Nobody has a chance to become complacent. Everybody's excited and teaching and learning together. And agility mentality spreads quickly through other teams.
I fully agree with that. That's all great. We are now at the top of the hour, everyone, and I really appreciate the conversations this week. In November, I'm going to be traveling the planet a little bit, but we will have the same November last meeting of the year. We will still have that, but if you guys are in Ireland, specifically Dublin, on the 5th and the 6th, I will be there at a private event, but I am willing to do some nightly meetups with people if you guys are in the Ireland area. After that, there is a chance that on the 8th and the 9th, I'll be in Gdansk, Poland. Always love to visit people there. I know that there's a few people on this call that are calling in from Poland. Let's go ahead and meet up while I'm there. And then finally after that, on November 11th to the 16th, I'll be at the Agile Testing Days event over in Germany. Please, if you guys get a chance, even if you don't attend the event, please stop by. Let's have a conversation. Let's keep everything going. And with that, thank you all for today's call. It's been great. And thank you for sharing your insights. Look forward to talking to you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
It was very helpful.
This podcast is provided by the Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.